So let's start with the easiest. Let's start with the front view. Obviously, the front view is going to be very simple. In the case of the front view, we just have these 5 squares. So, by the way, in the full course, we will be doing all these 9 views. The full course is available on Skillshare and Udemy, link in the description. Okay, let's start. First, we draw in red the 5 blocks. You can use a square tool if you prefer, but I prefer to eyeball it because it's pretty good practice in general. As beginners, drawing perfect cubes is a pretty good practice because it helps us to eyeball proportions, which is going to be useful all the time when we're painting and sketching, of course. And when we're done, I'm going to use this measuring tool to make sure I got it more or less right. In Krita, you can find the measure tool in the toolbox docker, and it looks like this. And in the tool options, you can see the distance and the angle which you're measuring out. In this case, we can see that I did a reasonably good job, and these distances are pretty close to 60 pixels, all of them, and these angles are close to 90 degrees, all of them. So I'm gonna call it good enough, and we're going to go on to the next stage, which is to drawing the basic forms. We're going to use these cubes to help us construct the basic forms of the head. We create a new layer, and on this layer we're going to draw the forms. We start with the sides, and then we just need to do the top of the head. This would be the cranium. If we look at the jaw, we'd see that approximately here would be the lower jaw. And if you look at the bone, the jaw would come down over here. This is where the hinge would be. So somewhere over here would be that hinge. And the jaw will go about 1/3 of the way down. So this is about 1/3 of this square. And then when it comes to the front view, it's easy to complete the jaw just like this. So remember, this is for the skeleton. When we're drawing the face, including the flesh, this would be filled up with flesh and muscle. And draw the center line and the brow line. So what we've ended up with now is the basic shape of the head, and it actually looks very similar to what we would get with the Loomis method. So those of you who know about the Loomis method, you basically already know how to continue. So this method is actually quite similar to the Loomis method, but instead of thinking in terms of spheres like with the Loomis method and then cutting off the sides, we actually think in terms of cubes. And in my opinion, it's much easier to think in terms of cubes, especially for beginners. But the downside is it takes a little bit of extra time to draw in those cubes. But that's okay, right? Because we're still learning and we want to take our times with things and make sure we properly understand everything that's going on. But once we get more confidence and once we understand the face and the head better, we will be able to skip drawing these cubes, and if you prefer, you can draw a sphere instead, and then just like in the Loomis method. Or if we get really good, we can just draw in the center line and then construct the face from there. Okay, next we're going to sketch in the locations of the major features in blue. Features can be placed quite easily. First of all, let's start with the ear. The ear will be in this over here. When it comes to the brows, we'd have 2 eyebrows over here. This green is the brow line, and the eyes itself would fit in somewhere like that. The nose, the bottom of the nose would be over here. And the mouth would be 1/3 of the way down here. What else do we have? We also have the hairline, which would be on this line. With the sideburns coming down there. And those are basically the features. Next, let's add the line work. But before we continue with the line work, let's make these layers which we've added so far partially transparent. So that will be easier for us to see what we're doing. And let's also group all these layers and then select them and resize them and make it nice and big. So this is one of the perks of using digital software, digital painting software. If you're old school and on pen and paper, bad luck, you won't be able to resize your sketches after you've drawn them. So make sure you draw them nice and big to start off with. It doesn't have to follow these blocks perfectly, just interpret things a bit. Remember that these red, green and blue lines are just a guide. And then let's add a color layer. I'm going to use a base layer. And I'm going to just fill it in. Okay, now we've got the base done. I'm going to add another layer called the shading layer. I set it to multiply. Normally I like to pick a very light blue color and use that as a shading. This is going to be my shading color. So the original color, I'm just going to put it in the base layer so that I will be able to refer to this color again. And then I'm going to go back to my shading layer and I'm going to click on this, which is the alpha inheritance. And if you click on the alpha inheritance, you don't need to worry about coloring over the edges. So anyway, let's open the blocks and the forms to give us some guide. We can use block and forms to help guide us and help us figure out where the major regions of shading are. Okay, next let's put in our light source. I'm gonna put it over here, above and to the left of the face, and in front of the face. So this is supposed to be like a kind of three-dimensional arrow. It's a cone, and we can see that the cone is pointing into the paper and downwards and to the left. So if we were still thinking in terms of cubes, we'd be lighting up the front surfaces, the top surfaces, and the left side surfaces of the cubes. Of course, because it's a front view, we can only see the front faces of the cubes, but because it's a face, it's kind of rounded, so we will be able to see some shading, obviously. And obviously the features like the nose and the brows cause some shading too. Okay, now we sketch in the major regions of shading. And there we have the front view. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna see you in the next video where we're gonna do the side view.